Hi, it's Miles here at Fabricana. Before we go any further, I'm just going to remove the mask. The mask is here, of course, because we're filming during COVID. You may find in parts of the video that I still have the mask on to protect our camera person. So just so you know, it's all for safety. Let's talk about what we're making today. Now this isn't, I have to say right from the beginning, this isn't a skirt making video, but what we are doing is showing how to take your favorite skirt pattern and make it into a convertible little overall look. So I'm going to show you how to make the pattern for the suspenders. I'm going to show you how to sew them, how to do the buttonholes and the top stitching, so all the things that you need to do to create this look. Of course, we've created the look with a skirt, but would also be suitable for shorts or pants. It's definitely something that works best with a high waist, and even with a wider waistband is definitely the look that we're after. Speaking of looks that we're after, I'm definitely inspired by this kind of nautical look. I love the stripes that I have on with the white. We've done a little white top stitching and a little touch of red that I think is really fun. Before we go any further, I have to invite you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. There's lots of fun content there. If you love watching videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have lots of content that features fashion and home decor and quilt. So lots of things to increase your sewing knowledge. Knitting too, if there's any knitters out there watching this. So I think that's about all I have to say. We really should just get started. So let's go. Before we get started on making anything, let's talk about the materials that we need for this project. So of course, the first thing I want to talk about, and the first thing I always want to talk about, is fabric. We have chosen this beautiful, it's called a waffle cotton. It's more kind of like a line kind of texture than waffle, but it has that nice kind of spongy, beautiful feel to it. This particular one in navy is number let's try it again. It's number 25629 on Fabricana's website. This fabric comes in a lot of other colors that you'll have to check out for yourself, but we've chosen this beautiful navy because we want to do this project in a bit of a nautical theme. Less glamorous fabric, of course, we need some fusible interfacing. I'm using our Presto medium weight interfacing for the waistband and for the straps of our overalls. You will need some paper, a large piece of paper to be able to draft the pattern for the straps. And also you'll need a dressmaker's tape measure, a ruler for the drafting. Of course, we're sewing, so we always need pins. I've got a beautiful pink pencil. It doesn't have to be pink, but you'll need a pencil and eraser for the drafting as well. You'll need scissors for paper and for fabric. I've got some thread snips for trimming my threads as well. I've got a zipper handy for the back of the skirt. We are going to be showing these straps are convertible that are removable because they're going to be buttoned on. So I've got some beautiful big buttons here. We've chosen this beautiful red shade. I thought it would be kind of fun to mix it up with the navy, again for that kind of fun nautical theme. You're probably wondering why I have a coffee cup in front of me. I'm not actually drinking coffee while we film this, but you will need something with a round shape to create a beautiful curved edge at the end of your straps. So this coffee cup happened to be the perfect size for me for the width of the strap. Also, you'll need to know the measurement. If you're not making this for yourself, you will need to know the measurement from the person you're making it for's waist, from the front waistband crossed over to the back. If you're making it for yourself, that's great because you'll be handy to measure yourself. I've got my serger and sewing machine threaded up, ready to go. So I think we're about ready to get started on cutting out our fabric. So as I mentioned in the intro, this isn't really a skirt making video, but I did want to show the layout because it's important when you're laying out the skirt that you leave yourself a lot of extra width of the fabric, a nice long piece to cut out the straps and the waistband for your skirt. So we have drafted, we're making a half circle skirt. You'll be able to see in the intro and what the skirt looks like for fullness. So like I said, this is a half circle, so this is the front piece, which is a quarter of the circle. We're going to lay that kind of close to the one selvage and close to our cut edge. The back piece is split in half. This is the center back. It's split because there's going to be a center back zipper. So we're going to be placing that next to the front piece, again leaving lots of fabric available for the straps. This is one half of the back. Then we will flip it over, pin it down, cut the other half of the back. I have the waistband piece, like I said, will be running the length, and then I still have lots of extra width of fabric for the straps. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware when you're cutting out your skirt, whether it's your straight skirt, a full circle, or even a half circle like we're doing, just make sure that when you're laying it out that you still have access to a nice long swath of fabric on the lengthwise grain to create the straps and waistband. If you're interested in making your own half circle or full circle skirt, we do have a great DIY tutorial on our blog on our website at fabricana.com. The link will be in the description. So once you magically have your skirt or your pants at this point, you're going to put it on the person who's kind of wearing it, or send it to the person who's wearing it if you're distanced, or put it on yourself and mark where you want the buttons, which are going to be where the straps go. So we're going to kind of mark with a pin kind of the placement. We'll mark another one on the other side. So just kind of visually, look at kind of from the neck kind of down, and because that's essentially if you want the strap to be quite straight, you can use that as a guideline. And then we're going to measure from that point. So the button is going to be centered on the waistband, kind of up and down. So from the center of the waistband, we're going to place our tape measure. We're going to go up by the neck and then across the back and find the same point on the back, again halfway up from the waistband where we want to have the button. And on our mannequin, it's 33, because everyone is a different height from their waist. Some people are long in the body, some people are short in their body. So you want to make sure that this is an accurate measurement so that your straps aren't constantly falling off your shoulder, or that they're hiking your skirt or your pants up so that it's uncomfortable. So make sure that you take the time to mark where the buttons are going to be on the front and back, measure that distance, crossing over the back. If you do the crossover, it'll be much easier for your straps to stay up. If you do them straight, you may find that the straps want to fall off. So hopefully that's enough information for you to be able to just get that measurement, and then we'll be using that measurement to draft our straps. So the most important thing we're going to need to be able to draft our straps is the size of our buttons. So hopefully you've already purchased your buttons, or you'll have a chance to do this before you make your straps. So you know the size. We've chosen a fairly large button. I could see you maybe even choosing something larger. But the important thing is that your straps should be twice as wide as your buttons. So basically where the buttons attach, you have kind of half the width of the strap kind of surrounding the button on all sides. So hopefully that makes sense. The buttons that we have are actually indicated as 1 1/8 inches wide, so we know that our straps are going to be 2 1/4 inches wide finished. We also need a seam allowance in order to be able to stitch the strap. So the finished width that we're going to cut is actually going to be 2 1/4 inches plus a 1/2 inch on either side, which makes a full inch, so it's going to be 3 1/4 inches. So I want to be able to see the seam allowances. So I'm going to run my ruler along one straight edge of the paper, and I'm indicating a 1/2 inch distance. And that is the seam allowance. So that's already there. Then I'm going to draw the full width of the finished strap. So from the 1/2 inch line, I'm now adding 2 1/4 inches because my buttons are 1 1/8. And then from that line, I'm going to add another 1/2 inch for the other seam allowance. So the full width should be 3 1/4 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and actually cut that. Hopefully this is the simplest drafting you'll ever have to do. So what we're actually going to be doing is we're only going to do half the strap. We're going to use one end of our pattern piece as a fold. So I'm going to draw that, just the word fold there, to remind myself that this is just half of the strap. Then I need to draw half of the length of the strap. And we took the measurement. On the mannequin it was only 33 inches, but on the body we found it was actually 38 1/2. So we're going to draw half of the length of that down the center of our strap. So I know the center line now, and the full length of the strap for us, this is going to depend on your measurement. So we had 38 1/2 divided by 2, so it should be 19 1/4. Let's just double check. 19 1/4 inches. So we're going to measure that from the fold line of the strap, and I'm going to make a mark so we know that this point is where the button is going to sit. But of course we need to have more strap that goes beyond that. So from that point, we're going to do half the width of the stripe down. 1 1/8. It's actually the width of our button. And then we have to have a seam allowance as well. So we essentially know we have half the length of our strap to this point, then we have the width of our button to this point, and then we have a seam allowance, and that is where our strap will end. This is where the cup comes in. I was lucky enough to have a cup that basically was almost exactly the size of our strap. So hopefully you'll be able to find something round that will fit as well. I'm going to do this so that you can actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to center the cup across the width of the strap and lining up the cup with that line that I just drew. And I'm going to use a pencil around the cup. So that includes the seam allowance, so I know that I can cut that now. So there we have our finished pattern piece. It's going to have to be cut on a fold. We're going to need 2 of them because we have 2 straps. Actually, we need 4 pieces because it's front and back of 2 straps. So once you have your pattern piece ready, we can start cutting out the fabric for the straps. So as you recall from when we cut out our skirt pieces, we left a nice long piece that's nice and wide at one selvage in order to be cut all these strap pieces, because we do need to cut 4 of them. We have 2 straps, but they're front and back, so we need 4 pieces. So we can easily fit those across the leftover fabric that we have. And as we mentioned before, this is going to be cut on the fold, so we only had to make a pattern that was half the length, save ourselves a little bit of time, a little bit of paper. While we're doing this, I'm going to remind you to please follow us on social media. We are on Facebook. We have a great Instagram where we do lots of features, some really fast DIYs sometimes. And of course, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We've got lots of content for fashion sewing, for quilting, for home decor, lots of fun content. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So right now I'm just putting in pins. If you're a new sewer, you might want to put in more pins than I do. I tend to be a little bit of a cowboy with pins and just go for it. But if you're more comfortable with more pins, please do that. Then I'm going to cut out the piece. Do not cut across the fold. Just make sure that you cut the long lines around that nice curve and then back to the top. So I cut out all of the strap pieces. You'll notice these look black, and that is because for 2 of the strips, I cut out our strap piece in interfacing as well. I pressed the interfacing to the back side of 2 of the straps, and I'm going to apply 1 strap piece with interfacing to each strap piece without interfacing. I'm putting these right sides together, and then I'm going to pin all the way around the edges to get ready to go to the sewing machine. I'll just stick a few pins in here. Again, you may want to use more pins than I do, but please use as many as you're comfortable with. And then I will meet you at the sewing machine. So we have our strap pieces pinned together face to face. I'm going to start sewing. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That's what we allowed for when we drafted the pattern for the straps. So that's what we're going to be using while we sew. Now we also have to leave an opening in the strap so that we can turn the whole thing inside out. So I have to remember to leave at least 3 or 4 inches open so that I can turn the strap inside out when it's finished being sewn. I'm going to start with a back stitch. I'm just going to sew this quickly. I'm going to be a little more careful around the curves, but the long lengths I can sew through fairly fast. So if you're new to sewing and you want to be more accurate, slow down, take lots of breaks. You can hand work the needle instead of using the presser foot if you're worried about going too fast. But just keep kind of lifting and turning. See, I'm lifting the presser foot and kind of turning the work as I go. There's no race. There's no prizes for finishing first. Just take your time. Okay, so I made it around that corner. You can get up to speed again. So at this point, we want to make sure to pay attention to where we started so that we can leave that opening to turn the strap around. So once you've got that done, I'm going to show you how to grade and trim your seam allowances. So in case you're not familiar with grading seam allowances and trimming seam allowances, we're just going to go over that quickly. We have a curve here. Now if we just left this exactly as it was and turn this inside out, all this fabric in our seam allowance is all going to be bunched inside the strap and making it really lumpy. Also, when you're turning a curve, you know, you're going to get little pleats if you don't kind of clip your seam allowances. So very carefully, with the tips of your scissors, you need to clip into your seam allowance, being very careful not to stitch all the way to your stitching line. And this helps to eliminate those little pleats that might happen on the inside after you've turned your strap inside out. So hopefully you've got some scissors that are sharp right to the tip to be able to do this. Again, be very careful. And we're just going to do this around the curve. So this is clipping curves. If you've seen that in a pattern before, that's exactly what they mean, and it helps you turn things on a curve. The other thing is trimming and grading seam allowances. So the interfaced piece of our strap is a little bit thicker because we've got the interfacing. So we want to trim that seam allowance down to a half the size that it is right now. So on the interfacing side, I'm just going to put my scissors between the two seam allowances. I'm going to grab this. Oh, I'm not loving these scissors. I'm just going to cut half the width of the seam allowance away. Now I'm going to do that all the way around the edge of my strap, except for the part where I have the opening, wherever that was. I'm not going to see how it's open here where we haven't sewn. I'm not going to trim that away because I need to know the full width of the seam allowance when we turn it around so that we can press it at that ½ inch line. So just make sure that when you're grading your seam allowance that you don't remove anything from that opening. So I'm going to continue grading the seam allowance for both straps, and then we can look at turning the straps inside out. So I've got my two straps ready. They are trimmed and graded and ready to turn inside out. So I'm going to find that little opening and I'm going to start turning them inside out. They're wide enough I can probably get in there with my fingers to do it. Sometimes if you're making a belt for like a bathrobe or something, it's a little bit harder to turn and you might want to use some sort of tool like a chopstick, something. Do not use your scissors to turn things inside out. You will invariably end up very upset when you put your scissors through your fabric, so please do not do that. This is turning actually pretty easy. I just want to get it to the point where we get to the end so I can show you how to just really roll the seam allowances through so it's nice and flat, just about there. So notice I'm going to kind of like work the fabric kind of together, and I'm forcing the seam to open at the same time. I want to try and keep the seam allowances inside fairly flat so they don't get bulky, so I'm kind of like flattening out the seam allowances as I go. But I'm also kind of rolling them out so that we get that nice curved shape. And once you're happy with how it's turned inside out, you can probably press that. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. I'm going to turn that, roll it around the same way. And once the whole thing is turned, then I can roll out the seam allowances along the length as well, and then just press that as you go. Again, we're trying to get the seam allowances laying flat so they're not creating too much bulk inside, and also fully turned so that kind of stitching edge is right on the edge of our strap. So I'm going to continue to do this for this strap plus the second strap, and then I can show you how to do the buttonhole placement. So we've pressed around all of the edges except for, of course, where that opening is, and you're thinking, Miles, what do I do? You said you were going to show me. So basically, because we didn't trim away any of the seam allowances, we can kind of, you could use a seam gauge if you want to. I'm going to eyeball it a 1/2 inch, and you can just basically press that 1/2 inch back so that it lines up with the seam that you've already done. You want to make sure that it doesn't kind of bulge out, so that it basically kind of runs in line with the strap that you've already pressed. So just carefully kind of roll that around. Again, if you can kind of have a seam gauge handy or a little ruler to know that you're pressing back exactly a 1/2 inch. You can do that and then press it in place. Now once you've pressed it in place, we're actually going to close this with a slip stitch. We're going to have a link to our slip stitch video so that you can see how to do a nice invisible slip stitch that will close that opening up, so we'll be ready to move on. The next step is to make the buttonholes at the end of each of our straps, so I'll be able to show you how to place and make the buttonholes. So I've done the slip stitching. I hope you all have a chance to check out our slip stitch video. So I've got 2 finished, well, not quite finished. I've got 2 straps ready to do some top stitching. I do want to do a row of top stitching on all the way around the straps. If these ever get washed and they haven't been top stitched, they're just going to become a big mess and will need to be pressed all over again. So we are going to do a top stitch kind of about a 1/4 inch from that edge. You can use the thread that you've used to sew them in your matching color. We want to do kind of a bit of a nautical look, so we're actually going to be using this heavier top stitch thread. And because we're using a heavier thread, I've switched to a top stitch needle. We actually have these on our website if you want to visit. All the stuff that we have actually we're showing you today is on our website. So these are the Schmetz top stitch needles at our website fabricana.com. So I've got my top stitch thread in the machine. I just have the regular weight thread in the bobbin. I've tested this out on a piece of scrap fabric to make sure that the top stitching is going to look nice. Sometimes you need to adjust your tension when you're top stitching with a heavier thread, but I'm ready to go now. So I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot as a guide. So it'll be kind of between a quarter inch and 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to line up the edge of the strap with the edge of my presser foot. And I've also increased my stitch length. With the heavier thread, I think it looks really cute to have a longer stitch length, so you can kind of see every stitch. So I've increased my stitch length to 3.5. Just going to work that first stitch, the needle down. And I've started about halfway up the strap. I am going to try and hide where I stopped and started by pulling the threads to the back when I'm finished. Yeah, just find an inconspicuous spot to start and stop the top stitching. Stop for a second. I want to show you how beautiful that top stitching looks. And I've stopped here also because we're coming up to that beautiful curve that we have, and we are going to take that nice and slow. And here comes that curve. So you can see me just walking the machine by hand instead of the pedal. And then I'm just going to lift the presser foot and kind of go around that curve. So I'm just going to do a little bit more sewing so you can see what that curved end looks like. So hopefully you can see that there. Because we took our time, it's a nice smooth curve. And then I do want to get to the end of where we started sewing so that I can show you how to hide your threads, but I'll just do that. I'll just whip this off quickly and join you there. So I'm going to stop there, just a few inches away from where I started, because that'll give me an opportunity now to kind of pull if you pull your bobbin thread from the back, that'll help pull your top thread, your needle thread, to the back. So you can see that I have both threads now in the back, and I'm going to tie those off so I know those ones are already done before I finish. I'm just going to do a double knot there, nice and secure, and trim that. And notice we didn't do a back stitch when we started, and we're not going to do one when we finish either because we're tying the threads off in the back. I'm going to overlap by like one stitch. And now I can pull this thread through and tie that one off. I'll just do that quickly. Trim that. So what we have achieved is just kind of an invisible spot where there's no back stitching and it looks like continuous stitching all the way around. So here we have our beautiful strap with our nice heavy duty top stitching. I've grabbed the pattern that we made just to kind of remind ourselves where we're placing our button. As you recall, we kind of did the strap twice as wide as the button, so the button could be centered and we'll have half the width of the button kind of surrounding it. So remember, we had a seam allowance at the end curve, and then again the start of the buttonhole was the size of the button away from the seam allowance. I hope that all makes sense. I'm going to use a ruler, and I just had some chalk here. I'm going to just use some tailor's chalk and this ruler. So the size of my buttons were 1 1/8 inches. So I'm using my ruler to draw that from the end of the strap. And I'm just going to do kind of a little mark across there. And that'll be the start of our buttonhole, but it'll go up into the strap. We want our button to sit kind of centered in that curve that we've created. So the center of the buttonhole is actually going to be, or the end of the buttonhole is going to be right there, which is where the button will sit. Then basically, I want to know where the buttonhole is going to lay. So I'm going to draw another line. Now because of the machine that I have that actually measures the button, I don't need to draw the length of the buttonhole. Maybe you have a machine that doesn't do that. So if you don't, then draw out the length of your buttonhole, which is the size of your button, 1 1/8 inches, and you can make another mark. So that is our buttonhole placement. If I can grab one of the buttons, I'll show you how it's going to sit. If we center the button on that junction there, it's going to be just like that, so that there's a nice even bit of the navy blue surrounding our beautiful red button. So what I've done to get ready for the buttonhole, of course, the last thing I did was the top stitching. So I had to change the thread to my regular sewing thread, change the bobbin. I've changed the needle. I was using a top stitching needle, so now I'm using a regular universal needle. I've changed to a buttonhole foot, and I've set the size of the buttonholer, so I am ready to go. And I've also changed this machine setting to sew the buttonhole that I want, which is a nice rounded end buttonhole. So what we need to do is get this little intersection right below the needle. So thankfully, I've kind of extended that line. Maybe I'll extend it a little bit further just so that we can see it more easily under the buttonhole foot. And I'll even kind of extend this line a little bit. This chalk will erase after. Just want to make sure that the buttonhole is centered really beautifully on the strap. So once you've got your strap, the intersection is perfectly under the needle, we can start sewing our buttonhole. Every machine is going to be a little bit different about buttonholes. I know my machine at home is very different from this. So whatever method you have to sew your buttonholes, I hope you're familiar with your machine. And here we go. Here is our beautiful rounded end buttonhole, nice and centered on our strap. I'm going to grab my buttonhole opener and show you how to open up the buttonhole. And then I will continue to sew the rest of the buttonholes on the other ends of the straps, and we can move on to sewing on the buttons. So here is the beautiful tool made specially for opening buttonholes. It is very sharp, so please be very careful if you have one of these. I highly recommend having one. Trying to open a buttonhole with a seam ripper or a pair of scissors is just asking for problems. I've put some wood underneath it. The wood will get damaged, so don't use anything you really love. I'm going to start opening the buttonhole where the button's actually going to be sitting. So this end of the buttonhole is where the button will sit. So you notice that the buttonhole opener is not a huge tool, so I will have to use it more than once to get the size hole that we have here. I'm just going to place the blade in the buttonhole and put a lot of pressure on it, and that will actually cut right through the fabric, like that. So I'm going to open it enough that it will allow the button to pass through. It's a little bit more. So that's quite a lot. I'm not sure if the button's going to go through yet. Nope, not yet. So I'll continue going. Now you have to be very careful that you're not cutting into the stitches of your buttonhole. That would not be nice. I think we're okay now. So you want a nice, the button will go through, but you still want a little bit of tension on it. So there we have opening a buttonhole with our wonderful tool. I'm going to continue making the buttonholes for the other strap, the other end of this strap, and then I will be sewing the buttons onto the waistband. So we've sewn on our last button. I'm ready to do up the second strap. And there we have it, our completed kind of overall look. We love it with this skirt. I hope you'll have a chance to try it with your favorite pattern for pants, or even it would be really sweet with shorts for the summertime. Before we go, I want to remind you to please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. There's lots of great content there. If you love videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's lots of great content for quilt and craft and fashion and home decor. So please subscribe to this channel. If there's anything that you've seen in this video that you really love, especially this fabric, and you want to see the other colors available, you can find them on our website at fabrichana.com. As well as lots of notions and lining and all kinds of wonderful things. Every time I look at this, it just makes me want to watch the musical Anything Goes. I love the music, 1930s Cole Porter. I think this really fits in with that look. And before we go, I just want to invite you all, please, use the colors you want, the buttons you want, the top stitching, the trims to make it for yourself. Remember, the hashtag is so true and be you.